Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Dion, Kenny, and Adam for a new episode of Wuxia Weekend. It's been a long time, so me and Dion had a podcast. Like what was it, Dion? Like a month ago or 2 months ago?
2 months ago.
2 months, and we finally got everybody back together, and so we wanted to do an episode on a Kuang movie because he passed away recently, and Dion had suggested The Four Riders, which I hadn't seen, and I don't think Adam or Kenny had seen. I could be wrong.
New to me.
Okay, so that seemed like a good choice. And again, this is a movie directed by Chang Cheh. It came out in 1972. The description from Celestial Pictures is this prime example of director co-writer Chang Cheh's mastery takes place right after the Korean War. As a kung fu master, combat instructor, explosives expert, and missile specialists heroically represent the Book of Revelation's four riders against murder, corruption, jealousy, and greed. So I know that some people had some issues with that description, but that's, I that prepares your mind for the story, I think, right? Would you guys say?
Yep.
And so I don't know, what did you guys think of the storyline? What were your thoughts on it?
I just thought it was things escalated very quickly. It felt like I enjoyed the movie. So the movie itself was great. I'd say I'd give it a 4 out of 5. It's just that some parts of it, it really did sort of snowball. I think it started from like very innocuous, like bumping into some thugs in the street, like beating up a soldier kind of thing, and then suddenly you've got like at the end of the movie, you have like mass brawls between like what looks like 50 to 60 people, some of which have guns, like rifles with infinite ammo, and there was a lot going on like that you wouldn't expect from like just the sort of the beginning of the movie, and the description says that there's like an explosives expert and a missile soldier or whatever it was, right? But there wasn't much of that in the actual movie itself. And as for the sort of the four horsemen aspect, I can see sort of what they were trying to do with that, but at the same time, and I think we'll go into more detail about this later, but it definitely it felt a little bit sort of ham-fisted into me. But yeah, but I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was good. It was enjoyable, and yeah.
Anyone else, or does everybody agree?
Kenny. I mean, it started off really slow and quiet, and then out of nowhere, it's like mayhem breaks out. And I agree with the description, what Kenny said about the description. They don't identify themselves in the movie as any of the, well, two of them, I think, said that they were combat instructors, but the other two never identified what their jobs were in the army. So it's kind of like, well, where'd they get that information from? And I think the Four Horsemen was kind of forced, didn't kind of like happen organically, and it's a stretch. But I liked the movie. I thought it was a good movie. It's realistic and down to earth, and it's just a really good story.
Yeah. Adam, how about you?
I feel bad that like every time David Chang and T. Lung go to any foreign country, whether it's like Thailand or Japan or Korea, they always get into trouble with gangsters. It's like, can't gangsters just leave them alone?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, but no, I enjoyed the movie. It's just solid Chang Cheh. It's like I haven't done this podcast in a very long time, and it's like, oh, we're doing a Chang Cheh movie again. All right, I'll come back, no problem. But, yeah, it's just a very solid Chang Cheh movie in my opinion.
Yeah, this kind of has like the no BS Chang Cheh sort of approach, I would say. It's not like I think but I get what Dion and Kenny were saying about the Four Horsemen, because it's like, like to borrow like terminology from horror movies, there's like Chang Cheh and elevated Chang Cheh movies, and this doesn't quite reach the elevated level because the Four Horsemen aren't integrated as thematically in like it almost raises the scene where he's reading from the Bible and he's talking. It's like, oh, he's actually talking about like there's a biblical passage being discussed in the movie, and so it's important. And then you think that it's going to be like more operatic in how it handles that aspect of it. Like they're going to all like, and it laid the groundwork. Like they both had really good reasons for wanting revenge, and so I was like, ooh, the two of them are gonna like. They're all going to get together and they're going to find some motorcycles so that they'll be riders, and then they're going to ride in, and there's going to be this big dramatic like fight between them and the gangsters, and they're going to be the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and it'll make total sense. And it just didn't fully gel. Like there was still kind of this big revenge thing, but they were also kind of just trying to run away, and they weren't really going for revenge, and it was sort of revenge so it was still entertaining and fun. But it wasn't as glorious of a catharsis as it could have been at the end, if that had been.
I'd say, it's like basically this is a movie I'd recommend to Chang Cheh fans, but it's not a movie I'd go if someone had never seen a movie of his and I'm like, oh, watch this movie to understand why I like this guy a lot. It's like this wouldn't be the one I'd pick.
And I think but there are other elements like the So number one, I was thrown off by the very, like, I know, Dion, you mentioned the opening shot, and so I just want to clarify. I'm not talking about that. That's a different thing. But the opening sequence when he quits from being a soldier and just goes off, that sort of threw me off because at first it was almost a little bit goofy. And so I thought, oh, we're going to get like a different tone.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It did feel very comedic early on. And
so I was like, oh, maybe like a MASH type situation.
Yeah.
And but then you got sort of the more, for lack, like I don't know, like more of the traditional Chang Cheh style music selection to it with the trumpets and I was like, okay, I'm in a Chang Cheh movie that's in firm Chang Cheh territory. But I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. I think I agree with you guys though that there were just certain elements that could have been more cohesive and. Some of the things, and again, that's what's on the box, so we can't hold it to that. But the promise in the movie was the four horsemen, and I was sort of like, okay, there's four of them, but so yeah, I get what you're saying there. And I liked the way that again, this is sort of a Chang Cheh movie where it's about the men, but I liked some of the like. The evil woman with the darts, I liked that character. That was a particularly vicious character that I was afraid of during the movie, and it turned out with just justifiable reason. So I don't know what were some of the other aspects of the film that you guys enjoyed.
Speaking of the darts lady, that was an unexpected topless scene there. It was just like, I'm not sure what purpose that served, because it sounds like from like sort of further dialogue that what was David Chang's character's name again? Chin Yi ran away from any sort of intimacy immediately afterwards anyway. So there was literally no point in her like stepping on him with her tights and then like taking off her clothes. That was
I think that was getting bums in seats is what that was about.
Was that in the trailer, do you reckon? They cut off just before the final button popped off.
I'd be curious if it was. But yeah, I think maybe you could say it was there to help establish something about his character and her character at the same time. She's sort of supposed to be like this, this more nefarious character, and he's, even though he's spending all of his time basically in a brothel. It's like a strip bar, but it seems like it's pretty much a brothel, and he's underneath it all, he's a virtuous character.
That's another thing actually. So a lot of the I found that a lot of the sort of scenes in the club difficult to watch, in the sense that he's lying there stone-faced with 1,000 yards there. Maybe like at first I thought maybe this is like a representation of of his PTSD or whatever, as he sat there with was it Wency, is that her name?
That was who was it? That was Wency, played by Lily.
With Lily's character sort of kissing him as he has no reaction and then taking money from his pocket. I haven't been to a club, but I don't feel like that's how they work. But like, maybe things were different back in the 70s.
Well, I think the reason she's taking money from his pocket is because it's probably supposed to work a different way, but he's just so catatonic that she's just you know what I mean? And it turns out that she doesn't even keep the money; she gives it back to him later. So, but I don't know. I think that was supposed to. I mean, I don't think they would have used that terminology, but I think that was supposed to be his PTSD because he was definitely out to lunch in those scenes, wouldn't you say? Like he,
definitely. He was out to lunch, but
yeah, there is real tonal whiplash at the beginning of this movie because you get that real contemplative kind of snowy kind of stuff going on during the opening credits, and then boom, you go into that comedy scene at the army base, and then boom, suddenly we're kind of watching this guy wallow in PTSD in a brothel. So it's kind of a strange beginning to this movie before it kind of settles into a tone.
Well, I want to get back to what Dion was saying, but I also want to connect to something Kenny said, which is it escalates quickly, like both of you said, but also it takes its time kind of laying the pieces down. So it felt weird because it was like it did escalate really quickly, but it also was like a slow burn at the beginning, which I kind of liked.
The slow burn I enjoyed because it introduced each of the characters and it introduced each of their personalities. The fourth one that's kind of not as big of a star as Chen Kuan-Tai and David Chiang and T. Lung, we don't really get to know that much about him, but the other three, we can get to see their personalities and what kind of people they are from the scenes that bring us that they have by themselves. Like with Chen Kuan-Tai in the hospital, we get that he's in love with this nurse, and with David Chiang, he's catatonic from PTSD, and T. Lung just seems to be not really.
He's like the loose cannon. Isn't he like the loose cannon guy? He's like the rebel. Like, I quit and I steal a Jeep and I sell it for $20, and
Yeah, he's definitely a bit off.
And I guess he's like the Hawkeye character in the group before signing Nash.
Yeah, I would say that.
But I do think that was meant to be PTSD. I get what you're saying though, Kenny, because it was sort of weird because you're like, say something. I want you to say something. Like you're just sitting there, and but it's part of the character. And they even comment on it. I think the bad guy, what was his name, Mr. The number 2 at the nightclub. Do you guys remember his name?
Nope.
Oh,
Lei Tai.
Yeah, Lei Tai.
Yeah, Lei Tai said he's still fighting the war. So that's like a theme. And you mentioned the Chen Kuan-Tai character. I kind of liked his whole setup where he's listening to really sad classical music, and the nurse comes in and he's got a thing going on with her, and she comments on it, and then she shows her this passage from Revelations, and
that's the same move I always use.
Does it work, Adam?
It does, every time.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to tell you about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. That's but I like that intro. I like that intro to his character.
I was going to say, sort of at that point when he's reading from the Bible, I was trying to figure out which of the 4 characters was going to correspond to which of the 4 horsemen, but then I couldn't.
Yeah, that was definitely. I think there were clips though of them showing people as the horsemen. Didn't that show the actors, or was it just a generic?
It was hard to see who was playing what. They had, I think it was the 4 actors, and in more sort of medieval-ish ancient armor and stuff.
I believe they were 4 white guys.
We could have gone by their clothing because David Chang at the end wears a red jacket, right?
Oh.
Right.
And I'll bet you that might actually be keyed to the clothes. I could be wrong because I don't remember. I should have been. Honestly, that's like one of the main things I should have been looking for. But I'd be curious if anybody pulls up an image of the movie, if there is an indication of like white, red, black, and what
Pale.
what's the pale horse is that gray, or is that like a blonde horse, a pale horse?
I think it's supposed to be like gray. In paintings that I've seen, sometimes it's represented as a skeletal horse because death sits upon it.
Okay. So, but any of those colorations, I think, is maybe what we should have been looking for. But,
so are we? So I'm just looking again at the actual sort of the Four Horsemen and I'm trying to tie it in. So, do we think Chen Kuan-Tai's character is supposed to represent? I was gonna say, actually no, maybe Wang Chung's character is supposed to be sort of famine because he was like. He's coming from like a poor looking village and he was like, oh, we need lots of money to have fun in Seoul and that kind of stuff.
Who would you put as Conquest, War, and Death then?
Chen Kuan-Tai as Death, just because he was the one who was already in hospital, and hospitals, military hospitals, I guess, also do tend to carry like the connotations of death around it. And I don't know who between war and conquest. I don't know what the difference between war and conquest. I know the difference, but I don't know how I'd like divide it between T-Lung and David Chang, to be honest.
I would probably put David Chang as war only because he was still fighting the war.
Yeah.
And he seems to be in a battle in his mind with the PTSD. And I guess that would leave T-Lung as conquest. And I only see that only because at the beginning of the movie, he quits the army, and that's like conquering something. I don't know. That's just my thought.
Well, I guess maybe that's right, because T-Lung might have conquered his traumas of the war, whereas David Chang is still sort of stuck in it, right?
Right.
So once they overcome, like, I was thinking sort of like there were sort of allusions to, yeah, this is different representations of the actual outcomes of war. I don't know why Wang Chung is so sort of naive feeling and sort of like, I don't think he's supposed to be a fresh soldier or anything. Because I think everybody here, the war is over, so they've all fought in the war and they've survived that. But I don't know why Wang Chung has kept his sort of naive, sort of childlike behavior. T-Lung seems to have like broadened his mind after the aftermath of the war. Chen Kuan-Tai was injured and like bedridden, and David Chang is still stuck in the war, kind of like the different stages of like how people deal with the war.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
So,
also, it says, I'm trying to find.
It could
go
also
ahead.
be a matter of what they were doing during the war too, because I don't think they were together during the war. If I recall, they just kind of met during that first scene where they're together.
Well, no.
And so then Wang Chung, no,
David Chang and T-Lung were actually friends and worked together as the Kung Fu combat instructors.
Okay.
And then Chen Kuan-Tai was, what's his name? The fourth one. I always forget his name. Was his
superior,
colonel, or he was he was above him.
Oh,
So
okay.
in pairs they were together, but they all met in this one town in Seoul.
Gotcha.
So the other thing too is conquest is sometimes associated with Jesus, and so any character that might have been like a Jesus figure could have been more likely to be the white horse.
And sometimes it's also pestilence and the Antichrist.
Yeah. So I guess they don't even open it up to one of the bad guys. I don't know, but I don't know. I feel like to really properly assess that element of it, I need to see the movie again, because I really think I missed some of the color scheming that would have been important. Once I realized, oh, he put on a red jacket at the end, that suddenly clicked it into place a little bit more for me. But if all the other pieces clicked into place or not, I'm not sure, because I would need to rewatch.
I felt like they were always like wearing the green army uniform throughout most of the movie, except at the very end when he put on the red jacket, right?
But that's what I'm talking about. I'm wondering if like maybe one of them took off the green thing and there's a white
with
shirt
their
underneath.
t-shirts or a different color or something.
I'm watching the end now because I have it playing in the background.
Okay.
But T. Lung has actually a beige shirt under his uniform.
So that's pale. That's pale, right? Would
Or
beige-
yeah, or beige is kind of a white. It's an off-white. Oh, nope, that's a lie because all the other three have the same
Okay.
beige
All right. Well,
under their
Oh no, but the ending scene is after they stole the GI's uniforms, right? So they should all be wearing the same thing at that point.
right. Because
So
right now they're
maybe
fighting in the gym towards the
Yeah.
very end.
okay. Well, we'll maybe we'll if one of us gets a chance to rewatch it, we can bring news of of how well it keys to the Four Horsemen. What about some of the other characters in the movie? So I mean, we obviously have the four main characters, but what did you guys think of the villain? What's his name? Mr. Hawks. So played. I think his name was Andre Marquis. Is the name of the actor? Who
Oh, yeah.
Who's apparently this is his one movie. This is his one big role that he's listed on in a Hong Kong Movie Database. But I mean,
Typical white villain, I guess. He doesn't really stand out
No.
to me. He's just making decisions behind the scenes that
Yeah.
affect everybody, but it's not like I wouldn't want to say that important because it's his whole operation, but
He doesn't do anything, is what
Yeah.
I'd say. Like he's there making.
take him
like,
out, it would still be
Yeah.
this.
Well,
He's
he's
a
basically there
manager.
blaming everyone for making wrong decisions all the time and messing this up, but he never really does much himself.
it might have been one of those things where they just needed a Western actor, and there was a small pool to choose from, and so they weren't able,
Probably.
Which I mean, it was an interesting choice. Like, okay, we're gonna have because it's a drug route that goes to America using like American GIs who are discharged or whatever. So it makes sense. Okay, we're gonna have like a character who's American or European or something. But I could have used a more compelling person in the role. I felt like he didn't fill out the robe. He had this bathrobe on, and I really got sick of looking at his knees. Do you know what I mean? It was just very.
Didn't you like his massage scene though? I mean, that was pretty good.
I mean, but yeah, but he wasn't doing anything in that scene. He was, that was just sort of illustrating the power he had over everybody else.
Oh, I know.
But I found the number 2 and the Dart Lady to be much more compelling characters.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's
So, but and
Just
you know,
wondering,
what?
so is it just a question about the sort of the setting? This is set there. Is this after the Korean War?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
supposed to be
1953, which is when it was set. So
1953. Okay.
yeah,
It's an interesting premise, which is like, after the war, is now the time for them to like really like, build the foundation of a solid criminal drug enterprise. That it made sense, and I liked that, it explained why all these characters were there. It explained, the system they were using to transport the drugs and everything.
yeah, it's interesting because it gives you a lot of detail on that stuff to an extent compared to it being a run-in with gangsters. They really didn't need to go into any detail about what the gangsters were up to at all. So it was kind of interesting giving that whole backstory. I mean, you could have set this anywhere at any time as far as the central plot goes. But
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I wonder if that has any sort of basis in history. Like, was there a history of like soldiers being used to smuggle illicit substances across borders and stuff?
there wasn't the Vietnam War, which of course was going on at the time this movie was made. So I mean, it could even be them just doing the thing MASH did of taking a Vietnam plot and putting it back in the Korean War.
When I was a kid, I thought MASH was set in Vietnam because
So did I.
Yeah.
But I also liked how they built this world that the characters lived in Seoul. Like, I didn't feel like they weren't giving me Seoul. They were giving me some kind of underworld that exists in Seoul that these characters are all participating in, that sort of connects the hospital with the soldiers, with the seedy club, and it kind of ties in like that. Like, if you grow up hearing stories about what wars were like from relatives that were in wars, and it seems like that's kind of the social life that was prevalent for a lot of soldiers. So So it just was a believable setting, and I don't know. I thought the nightclub served as I mean, there were a number of places. There was the hospital, there were her house, but I thought the nightclub was a nice center to a lot of the story. It worked for me.
There's one particular scene actually that sticks out, just as a backdrop thing. I think it's after T Lung's character and Wang Chung separate for the first time, and and I think T-Lung's walking down the street, and people look like they're trying to scramble to stay out of his way and like not be on camera. I wasn't sure if it was like one of those things where they hadn't like cleared out the street for filming kind of thing, and they were just like trying to film this scene as people were living their day-to-day lives.
That's an interesting scene, because like I had that same thought too, and it was important because I was like, wait, are they stepping out of the way because he's a soldier in uniform, or are they stepping out of the way because there's a camera crew and they don't want to get in the middle of the movie? And so I wasn't sure which it was, and it kind of made it, it's minor point, but it did make a difference in terms of what I thought the intent was of the guy stepping aside. So I don't know. I have no idea. I did like that. This was a movie that I think benefited from having a large number of outdoor shots, though, and setting things outdoors and not relying quite. I mean, there were some sets, but not as many. And I felt that added to the movie's believability just because of the kind of film it was. But so I don't know. What did you guys think of the action in this movie?
I liked the action, especially the big brawls that would break out between the bad guys and our four riders. I mean, and they didn't just happen in one place; they happened in several places. Which was, I really liked, I guess, the one in the gym where they're jumping on trampolines and over the gym equipment and stuff.
Yeah, I like it. It reminded me, what's the Lau Kar-leung movie where there's a fight in a gymnasium? Do you know which one I'm talking about? Was that oh God, the quasi sequel to My Young Auntie? Was it that movie?
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about too.
And so it reminded me a little bit of that sequence. But I loved him like hefting the barbell and attacking people with it. And I liked how I had all these questions. Like the woman pulls out a gun and she doesn't fire it, and it creates this tension because you're like, wait, somebody's got a gun. And there's a lot of little scenes like that where you see a gun on the ground and you're just waiting for somebody to pick it up or not pick it up. And I like that they messed around with that. And I also it took me a while to figure out why she wasn't firing the gun or why there was this hesitation to start shooting in the scene. But I don't know. I thought, and I liked how like you guys were saying, these waves of men, just like it was just like a ridiculous number of people like where they get surrounded, and it's like, well, not even they can handle this number of men.
The movie you were thinking of, Lady is the Boss.
That's it.
I actually really like the sort of cinematography, I guess, in the gym scene as well, because normally when you have brawls like that, if it's not directed well, you're just going to see like people, the mooks like dancing around in the background, like waiting for their turn to jump in for the action, right? But in this case, because they split up the protagonists into three sort of different areas, they could use the camera movements to give a more dynamic feel to the whole fight scene. So it feels like, rather than like people sort of waiting, dancing around, going in one at a time, it felt more organic in the way that the fights developed, and they could sort of change focus to sort of give a breather, I guess, for one part of the crew, and then it just avoids the whole I don't know. Is there a word for that when you just see people in the extras in the background, like shuffling and some of them tripping over themselves and not really doing much?
I haven't heard a word, but there should be, because you see that a lot, especially in movies with a large number of combatants where people are maybe milling about in the background and waiting for their turn. You see it also just like when people show up at like an inn and there's people hanging out, and not everybody is committed to the role of being an extra, so. But yeah, there's got to be a term for that. Another thing I liked about the movie too was kind of related to what you said about the scene where the guy steps out of the way, was how a lot of the music we were hearing was also music characters were hearing in the movie itself. Do you know what I mean? Like that, like especially in the hospital sequences. And I don't know why, but I just liked that. I liked that there was like this in setting explanation for the music, and that it sounded a little bit different, but it was also still providing like a certain level of atmosphere. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So onto the filmmaking.
Wait, can we go back to the fights? Because I
yeah,
wanted to say something.
Yeah, of course.
But one thing I liked about this movie with the fighting was it focused more on hand-to-hand combat and not so much on gunplay. I really like hand-to-hand combat more than I like gunplay. So when this is a more modern type film, so when they do more modern type films, they usually rely heavily on guns and not hand-to-hand. And I just appreciate that it was more hand-to-hand and that the guns weren't used very often. I prefer that.
Yeah, they did a good. I thought it was a good choice to make guns difficult to get, which becomes a plot point in the movie. So that was actually a nice twist. I really kind of like that twist of him trying to buy the gun, and he ends up ending up in that situation where when he gets the gun from, I was like, oh, if you go kill your friend, it was a nice kind of twist there.
Yeah, they did build that in. I also liked how again, like when the woman took out the gun and was about to fire it and didn't. And you're like, oh, maybe she's withholding fire because they don't want to attract the attention of the military or something. And
yeah.
So there are these good explanations for why people would be reluctant to just constantly be shooting. But then once the guns are brought into the fight, they become this menacing thing. And so it was very interesting because you had, like Dion was saying, you have all this hand-to-hand stuff, but they still made good use of the guns, and the guns served a important function in keeping that fight interesting and raising up that sense of like, oh no, like peril for the heroes. So
yeah, when everyone's firing guns through a whole movie, you kind of become, it's like, yeah, well, no one gets hit, that's fine, no one important's going to get hit, you kind of stop worrying about it. But
was that supposed to be a shotgun or a rifle that the Dark Lady was using?
I think it was the rifle, because it was a sniper thing.
It was, but then like the way Chen Kuan-Tai was using it made it look like a shotgun.
Yeah, I don't know that much about guns, so I tend to not weigh in on it if I don't know. But I kind of chalked that up to him being injured because he had been shot, and so I thought, oh, maybe his arms are just funky and he just can't hold it normal for whatever reason. I don't know.
And then there's the whole like if it looked a little bit like a double barrel shotgun, but he fired like a dozen or more shots from it.
Yeah, those guns were also shooting an awful lot too, I think. I don't think this is a movie where they're keeping track of ammo when they,
I do wonder, maybe is it because the I guess the director is not very familiar with directing sort of gun scenes, and they were just going for the cool pew pew impact of using guns, and the lethality of like one of being shot by a gun is like very bad for you kind of thing, and just glossing over the actual stuff like recoil and bullet count.
I just chalked it up to that not being a priority of the film.
Mm-hmm.
That's, but I don't know. I mean, you could be right. It could be. I don't really know what the answer is to that.
Yeah, I guess we never really count the arrows in the quivers either. If it were like, just pure sort of martial arts wuxia style movie, right? We just sort of assume that they've got enough arrows to keep shooting, and then they like fire off like 8 arrows in one handful at a time, like multiple times. Or whatever.
Yeah, it's like when they want it to be relevant, it could be relevant. And some movies will, like obviously Dirty Harry, that's an important idea in the scene where how many shots he fired matters. But here I just think it's just it was just kind of like it just didn't seem as important. And I thought that the guns, especially the handguns, had a slightly more frivolous feel to them in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like they were, I don't think they were aiming for like realism with those guns. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're very typical guns in sort of Chinese media is how I would describe them.
I mean, I think it's also like, you know, I think more of like an exciting action movie. It's not guys, it's not like a movie like you know, from the 80s or something where you get a different type of gunfire in these films, you know. But I think the thing I noticed about them was I thought they were fine, but when they fired, there was like a sparkle from the. I mean, there was like a spark that looked kind of odd on camera.
Yeah.
And
also when they get hit as well, sometimes I think like I think I remember when the people that shot the nurse were running away got shot. I think there was some sparkles from where the extras got hit. I don't know if that was like a mini explosion to show that they got hit there or whatever, the blood bags exploding or whatever, but there was some sparkles as well.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it was like an artistic choice, like he wanted that visual, but I just thought it made them look more like fake guns was the effect for me. But I still think they added a sense of peril. So about the filmmaking and the cinematography, Dion, I know you said the opening scene was one that you thought was really impactful.
Yeah, the opening scene really struck me because when it opened, the movie opens up and they show the credits. They're panning around what seems to be this desolate area, and it's completely blanketed in snow. And there's no noise at all. I think, and there's no music or anything. And I think the first sound that we actually hear is it's already switched over to springtime and they're on the base and the Jeep comes in. But it was just so silent that the silence was deafening in the snow. And you do see like 4 dots moving in one shot. And then they focus on this one flower with red blooms on it. And that was just like, that's just odd because in winter, usually nothing blooms, but there's this vibrant red flower with a yellow middle that's sticking out in all the white snow. And that just really struck me. And then when you come back to the end of the movie, you see the 4 dots again moving. So I'm assuming it's the 4 riders.
Yeah.
And
it's in black and white too at the end, right?
Yeah, and it's the snow again.
Yeah,
so it just like it kind of went full circle.
I found that closing scene very curious because I was like, well, what does that mean? Because it's black and white is a choice that matters. You know what I mean? And I didn't think it was a flashback, but a lot of times, you know, he uses black and white as flashback. So
was it black and white, or is there just not a lot of color?
It could have been that there was just not a lot of color. He might have just been very
That's what it was, just not a lot of color like at the beginning. And to me, it symbolized that the 4 riders had ridden off.
Their work here is complete.
Yeah, I kind of thought of Pale Rider when I saw that. You know what I mean? It kind of reminded me of the Pale Rider movie. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't know it. I really was like, oh, I felt like I missed something. Like, oh, something. Like I need to go back and watch this and see if there's like a bigger meaning going on here. But I did find that very striking and very curious, that final shot. And and overall, I again, it's not like a Chang Cheh movie in the style of One-Armed Swordsman where you have these very composed set sort of piece, you know, because it's filmed outside. But I liked the way that it was filmed, and I liked I don't know, there was a sense of realness to a lot of it that I liked. And I liked how it built that world. I liked, like, when you went to the bar, you felt like you were in that bar. When you went to the hospital, you felt like you were in the hospital, that kind of thing. So yeah, is there anything we haven't covered before we get onto our closing thoughts? I know we're shaking off some ring rust here, so, you know.
I can't think of anything else.
All right. So who wants to go first? And again, we're doing the 5-star system now. So in terms of ratings. You know,
We didn't talk about the Iron Triangle.
Oh yeah. Okay, so before we do that, is this an Iron Triangle movie?
I would have to say, in my opinion, the Iron Triangle is only the Iron Triangle if it's Chang Cheh, T. Lung, and David Chang involved as the three corners. But this movie has an ensemble as its star, so I would say, to me, it's not an Iron Triangle movie, because at this time Chen Kuan-Tai is a big star also. So he would make it, I don't know, a diamond. So it wouldn't be a triangle.
Okay.
Because
I mean, tend to agree.
Yeah, they would all, in my book, receive equal billing at that time. So yeah.
And they and even though they were like friends, they didn't have the closeness. I mean, they were friends in this movie, but they didn't have the closeness that they like.
They didn't achieve buddy status in this movie.
Yeah,
right.
Like there was a backstory that they're supposed to be buddies, but it just didn't. It wasn't on screen the way it is in some of their other movies. So maybe they were just preoccupied with other concerns, like their dead girlfriends and things like that. But yeah, so I guess I'll do the closing thought first, I guess, because it's we haven't done this in a while. So I don't know. I would give it. I guess for me, like, and again, this would definitely possibly change on rewatches and stuff, like, because there's a lot of things where it's like, oh, if there's more consistency with the Four Horsemen stuff, that might change things. I might notice things I didn't see this because this was my first time seeing the film. I thought it was a solid Chang Cheh movie. I would give it a 3-star just to be. I need more room for a 4-star. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is a perfectly good movie. I enjoyed it, but there are movies that I would want to be able to give to a 4 to that he's made, and that I'd want to be able to give a 5 to. And I feel like this doesn't quite rise to the level of the 4-star movies from Chang Cheh for me. So, personally, a 3-star, and I would definitely say, like Adam said, if you're a fan of Chang Cheh films, definitely take a look. If you want to see, some of the, things that we were talking about, like just in terms of the fight sequences and that sort of stuff, it might be interesting to watch. But there are probably movies I would put higher up on the list of, you got to see this Chang Cheh film. This is one I'm glad I saw it, but it didn't need to be like the first Chang Cheh movie that I ever saw. I'm glad that it was like the One-Armed Swordsman, rather than, this movie, say, or something. So Dion, how about you?
I would also give it a 3 out of 4, only a 3 out of 5, because, well, the connection between the Four Horsemen isn't necessarily strong. I mean, you could have taken the reading of that passage out and the movie still would have been good to me. So I kind of don't know why that was thrown in there. I would need some more of a connection between the Four Riders and the Four Horsemen to understand why it was in there. It did make me cry, so it couldn't be a 5.
Okay.
And I enjoyed the hand-to-hand combat, and it's an overall good storyline, and it was shot very well. So I'd give it a 3. I couldn't give it a 4 because it didn't evoke strong emotion.
Yeah.
It was just a good film to watch, and this is my 3rd time watching it, but I really like it.
Yeah, I think a 3's fair, because it does have a lot of missed opportunities, things in the movie that just didn't quite land, but it's still a solid movie anyway.
I think in the beginning I said that I was thinking this was like a 4 out of 5, but I think that's most likely due to the fact that I haven't seen any of these Shaw Brothers movies for a good while, and it's like the first Chen Cheh, also the first Chen Cheh movie in a long while, right? So, and adding on to the fact that I literally finished the movie like 15 minutes before the call started, so I think I was sort of riding the high of like, oh yeah, that was pretty good, but yeah. now that I've had a bit more time to sort of digest it, I do think 3 is a fairer score for the movie. I enjoyed the action parts. I didn't really see where the Four Horsemen part came in, although curiously enough, I see that in the HK movie database it says the UK title of this movie is The Hellfighters of the East. I feel like if I was thinking of this as like the Hellfighters of the East instead of like the Four Riders as like a movie title, it might have been a bit
Landed
better.
differently.
I think
more
the title
accurate.
choice mattered a little bit there. But then again, like Dion was saying, like if you cut out the entire Bible, the very dramatic Bible reading scene, sort of with like the half transparency, of Chen Kuan-Tai just reading from the Bible as the background scene of like an ancient battle going on was just overlaid across like that. That was a very dramatic scene that actually didn't contribute much at all. I'm wondering if it's because at that time, maybe I don't know how many people in that in China, etc., would be aware of what the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse are. So maybe it's one of the things they read about it, and they're like, oh, this is interesting. I could include this in the movie, kind of thing, and just and they try to shoehorn it in just because it sounded cool. I mean, Four Horsemen. They had 4-star actors, Four Horsemen. I mean, that's a great way to bill it, right? So, maybe I don't know, and obviously we don't really have the context now about asking the people involved and why did you choose this sort of motif to go for, but well, like I think a 3 is a fair score. The action was pretty good. The camera work for the large fight scenes was good. Everybody got like a fair share of the spotlight. Yeah, it was a fairly straightforward plot. I enjoyed it, and that's pretty much all there is.
Yeah, and I do think that the strength of that, like that scene being good, is kind of what undermined that aspect of the like if that scene was good and it set you were like ooh, like it sets your expectations up, and so you want to see it pay something, and so
it's funny because the title change didn't affect me from the standpoint that scene was good, but I forgot about it by the end of the movie just because it didn't connect. It's like I wasn't wondering which horseman is who or anything. It just kind of slipped right out of my mind after that scene ended.
I got really hung up on waiting for motorcycles. Like I was really convinced that motorcycles were going to show up, and I was like, okay, like how are they going to get the motorcycles? Because I was trying to imagine all the different ways they could get motorcycles, and I was like, they're really running out of time to get the motorcycles. I was really starting to like in a way, I feel like I'd have a much fairer analysis on a review because I wouldn't be so preoccupied with the motorcycles.
Well, I was waiting for horses to come in because 4 riders, my immediate thought was 4 riders on a horse, and then they read the passage about the 4 horsemen, so I thought, oh, they're going to be riding in on horses, but there were never any horses in the movie. So but I have a thought, maybe they shouldn't have been likened to the 4 horsemen, but they're the total opposite of the 4 horsemen, maybe because the 4 horsemen represent all the evil and what's bad in the world, and the 4 riders represent what's good in the world by trying to stop the greed, jealousy, corruption, and all the bad things that were going on in that nightclub.
I mean, that's definitely. I mean,
that's
I
my
think
thought.
That's definitely an interesting thought. And I the only thing that makes me hesitate on that. Well, again, and maybe I don't know how much Chang Cheh would have known about it, so I think that is actually feasible because he might not have because the 4 horsemen are supposed to be like sent from God, right? But that might not have been his operating assumption when he made the movie. So I think that's totally feasible. But yeah, I don't know. I still I don't know why. I just really got hung up on this idea of they're going to be on motorcycles and they're going to be like, and I was really expecting them to look like the 4 like I was expecting like a real interesting visual depiction of them on motorcycles looking like the 4 horsemen, like not necessarily wielding a scythe or anything like that, but just some kind of dramatic look. But yeah, so anyways, again, the movie is called The Four Riders. It was 1972. It was directed by Chang Cheh, and it was co-written by Chang Cheh and Ni Kuang. So it's obviously it's not a pure Ni Kuang movie, but it's a Ni Kuang film. And so I don't know, any thoughts before we head out, or are we all set?
I got one more random thought I'll throw out there as far as why the Bible thing even popped in there, is that I think it's around Christianity is relatively popular in Korea. So if they were doing stuff in Korea, maybe he encounters something there. I was like, oh, let me try and work it in, but he never quite fully worked it in. But yeah, that's just blind speculation on my part.
But I mean, it's true. There's, I know I've heard that it's very popular in Korea. I've met a lot of Koreans that are Christian. I met Catholics and Baptist Koreans.
Looking up, as of 2010, 29% of the South Korean population is Christian. So
I mean, that could certainly help explain it.
Yeah.
But,
I don't know why, but you triggered a random thought for me as well, which is I wonder what were the pieces that played on the gramophone, the record player in the hospital.
Oh.
One of the pieces was Ride of the Valkyries.
I can't remember. The name of the song is eluding me, but it's a very, very famous somber classical piece. They played the William Tell overture. I did hear them play that at some point. They were playing different pieces on it. But I don't know. It had an interesting effect. I really wish I'd had time to kind of sift through and remember what that melody was.
And if it had any significance to the movie, or was it just the case of this is an interesting bit of Western media we can insert into the movie kind of thing? We have the Four Horsemen, may as well get 4 random concertos or whatever and shove them in, right?
I mean, I liked how it accented his character. I thought that it felt like I don't know. It kind of gave him this brooding quality that I thought he was supposed to kind of have, and that later helped make sense when his character was so distraught over the death of his reaction versus David Chang's reaction were so different, right? And granted, he was probably more in love, but I don't know. They both seem to be, pretty interested in the woman that they were involved with. So why don't we end it there? And until next time, we will talk to you later.